Welcome back from the summer. It's nice to see folks here. With Barack Obama accepting the nomination for President of the United States, our election season is official. And we're going to hear from our local officials today, but I first wanted to make a couple of announcements. I want to thank Brad Garfield, who usually has this space, for generously allowing us to have our meeting here. He's meeting in the back of the Nautilus, but I offered to him an opportunity to say hello to you and the folks who are watching at home so people know about this wonderful networking opportunity that we have here in Larchmont and Mamaroneck. Brad?
Thanks so much. So a lot of you know me. I'm Brad Garfield, and I'm a television and film director and producer. But 4 years ago, I created a group called the Larchmont Mamaroneck Low-Key, Low-Stress Networking Group. And I put it together because of what was going on in the economy and what was going on in our community with a lot of people I know who were losing their jobs and businesses, local businesses that were closing down. And I was worried that Palmer Street was going to look like a ghost town if more and more stores continue to close. So I put together this group to help promote shopping local and to help members of our community network for potentially new jobs. I knew a lot of people that were looking to reinvent themselves. I knew a lot of people that were looking to get back into the workforce. And I had been involved in a couple other networking groups, and I always thought that there was too much stress, too many requirements, too much money to join, and it was always, it wasn't that much fun. So I put together a low-key, low-stress networking group where there's no membership fees. The only requirement is that you come to one meeting a year. We meet once a month, and it's all through LinkedIn. Okay, so if you know LinkedIn, we have a group called the Larchmont Mamaroneck Low-Key, Low-Stress Networking Group on LinkedIn. And when I put this together 4 years ago, we had 12 original members. We now have 600 members in the group, and we meet once a month. Mornings here on the first Friday of every month, at Nautilus time, 7:30 usually to 9 o'clock in the morning. But that's 1 month. The following month, we do an evening meeting. So we rotate. Morning meeting 1 month, the next month an evening meeting, because it brings in two different audiences, people that are able to come to these meetings. So we promote the community. We stress supporting and shopping local. As I said, it was called Larchmont Mamaroneck because we started off in this area. Now it's Lower Westchester, basically, that's in this group because we have members that come from White Plains, that come from Scarsdale, that come from Rye. So we let Lower Westchester in. The only requirement we have is they either have to live in Lower Westchester or work in Lower Westchester to be a member of the networking group. So feel free to contact me anytime. My email address is N as in Nancy, R as in Robert, productions at AOL.com. And I will connect you to LinkedIn, or I'll pass on the information to you on how to get involved with the LinkedIn group. If you're on LinkedIn, you can link into Brad Garfield, and I'll invite you to join our group. And I hope that you guys get involved because it's been very successful, and I appreciate the time here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
Good luck with your meeting and everything. Thanks a lot.
We're going to be registering people to vote, and Sue Hertz, who is our chair of our voter registration committee, has a sheet that she'd like to pass around. If there are people here who can assist in helping with voter registration, we're doing it at supermarkets and farmers market, that kind of a thing. There are specific times that you could sign up. So we would greatly appreciate your assistance with that. Just want to make, I think, one general announcement about the campaigns. Obviously, we've got a an election in the U.S. Congress, we have a state Senate race, we have a state assembly race, we've got local elections. We are planning to have a Meet the Candidates event in October, and we will send out an email with respect to that. I believe it's going to be the middle of October. We also are going to have our candidates debates after that, which is going to be the week before the elections. You are going to be receiving in the mail material from the candidates who are running for office. I attended the National League of Women Voters Convention in Washington, D.C. this year and listened to an excellent presentation about the way that candidates entice people to vote. And what we were encouraged to do was to look behind the material that gets sent out from the candidates. There are a number of ways that candidates can run for office. They can run on a record that has substance to it. They can run for office based on work that they have achieved over a period of time, and we can check those records. There are opportunities to be able to pay for advertising through campaign material, and in the alternative, actually denigrate the other candidate. It's another way to run for office. I would encourage everyone here and everyone at home that is evaluating the people who will be representing us in elected office to take a look very carefully at the material. Check the facts. Take a look beyond the soundbite for the substance of what is going on here, because denigrating a candidate is not going to help us determine whether or not this person is going to be representing us adequately. What we're going to try our very best to do for you, as our public service to you, because that's what the League is all about, is to look at the substance of the candidates that are running for office. We're going to be asking questions that are hopefully going to elicit not just sound bites, but a substantive understanding of the issues. And there are many issues that impact us. So I would encourage all of you in your own evaluations to do the same. I see that we have Steve Otis here, who's running for Assembly. We have Assemblyman George Latimer, who's running for State Senate. I'm going to introduce our speakers now, but at the end, we're going to open this up to questions. And I have for Nancy and for Ann, but we'll also have a brief opportunity for Steve and for George to be able to say something. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our Town Supervisor, Nancy Seligson, and after Nancy has an opportunity to speak, we'll introduce Ann McAndrews, who's the mayor of Larchmont Village. If you want to sit down, we can turn this mic, and is that going to work? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
LMC, you're okay? Okay, good. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see everyone. Nice to be here. I feel like we're starting a new year because it's a new school year. I guess you never really lose that feeling. But Beth invited me and asked all of us to talk about what's going on in our communities, what are the big issues, and mine are pretty much at the tip of my tongue all the time, so I have no problem talking about it. You're going to have to give me the cutoff sign, I'm sure. Number one is budget. Budget, 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 budget. And that is because in our municipalities in the state of New York right now, we are in a very difficult time. We have reducing revenues because interest rates are so low. We have state mandates from which we have very, very little relief that we have no control over. And we have a 2% tax cap on our tax levy. That makes for an incredibly squeezed budget. And what's happened is our surplus or reserves that all communities are required to maintain have been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. That makes us more vulnerable to different kinds of ratings in the financial markets. In the town of Mamaroneck, we're very fortunate to enjoy a AAA rating. There's not many municipalities in Westchester or New York State that enjoy that rating. Of course, my colleague does. And it means a lot to our communities. I think it means a lot to us from a borrowing standpoint because we borrow money cheaper that way. But it also means a lot to us from a psychological and pride standpoint in our communities. But with the situation we have at hand, it's been really tough. And it's going to be very, very tough to maintain that. So in the town of Mamaroneck, we said we've got to really analyze what we're spending our money on. We need to understand what are the most important things to our community. So we created a survey for residents, and I am hoping that you all have taken the time to do it, and if not, you have until September 9th because we extended the deadline. And I'm going to hand out these little cards that explain how to do it. All you do is go on to www.townofmamaroneck.org. And it's a survey asking folks, what are the services you like best in the town? What do you want us to spend our money on? Do you want us to go through the tax cap? What would you like to see your town like in 5 years? And these are the kind of questions we're asking because we would like to be able to plan more strategically going forward and to use that information to help us plan for our 2013 budget and beyond and the services that we provide. I know it's poorly understood by most people, although I think here we've got a pretty educated group, that a tiny portion of your taxes actually goes to the services that the municipalities provide, whereas the bulk of those taxes really go to the schools and the county. So it's hard for people to understand that the money they're paying to us provides a wide array of services when you think about it. And those services are kind of taken for granted most of the time because, you know, they're day-to-day services that we all depend on. Garbage, police, fire. You know, those are the things you don't really think of every day in your life. But it is things that we have to think about all the time in planning the budget in the community. So I really am pleading with you to go and take this survey because we need to get as high a response as possible, and it will really help us plan for the future. The other big event that's happening in the town, or big issue that we're working on, is the reassessment project. I know you have all heard about that, and the revaluation project has been in process for a while now. We've completed the data collection portion of the project, which means that the inspectors have gone out, they've looked at all the parcels in the community, they've written down the data, and you will now be receiving letters in the mail that are data letters, and you are asked to look at it and see if you think it gives you the correct information about your residents. If you feel that there's a discrepancy or there's something wrong with it, you have to call GAR Associates, who's running the revaluation for us, and they will set up a meeting with you, or you can do it over the phone. So it's still data collection phase, but now we want to make sure that there's accuracy in that data. And then in February, there will be information that goes out, mailed out, that's going to give you a basic idea of what your assessment would be and what it would mean to your taxes going forward. And at that time, you will also have the opportunity to call into the town, speak with GAR, and discuss the situation. So there's going to be intervals at each stage where residents are encouraged to communicate with the town and with GAR Associates if you think there is something that's inaccurate or inappropriate for that. I know it's a big, scary project, but it has been going very well. I'm knocking on wood. We've gotten a good response from people in terms of getting into homes and seeing them, and also just looking at them from the outside. So that's something that's moving forward in the town as well. Another area I wanted to highlight was environmental initiatives. I said when I ran for town supervisor that I wanted to do it because I wanted to accomplish some environmental initiatives in the town. And I don't know if everyone's sick of hearing it, but I'm hoping that they're excited about hearing it still. I've been very fortunate to work with some very talented individuals that have come forward in the community who have a lot of experience in environmental work. And when I say environmental work, what we're really looking at is reducing our energy use, reducing our carbon footprint, saving money for the town. We have Ms. Shell Lewis, who's here today, and she's sitting on the committee, and I have to thank her for all her hard work. And it's really been a pleasure to work with these folks. And we're creating a sustainability plan for the town, which will lay out some guidelines of what we'd like to do. We're focusing really on reducing energy use in the ice rink and the town center. The ice rink is the largest user of energy in the town. I was in there the other day on one of those tropical hot days, and inside the ice rink we are trying to make ice. It was completely foggy, it was raining from the ceiling, it was freezing, and you had a visceral sense of the amount of energy we must be using to try and create ice in the tropics. It was really something. I mean, I've talked about it a while, but it was the first time. No, we don't. That's why we're making ice now. We don't have ice in the summer. But the ice rink is 27 years old. Everything is breaking down. Apparently, 27 years is like,
Dog years.
100 years for us. It's dog years for an ice rink. So we've got to replace this equipment. We don't have a choice, but we're trying to do it in the most sustainable way. So even just upgrading the equipment is going to save us energy and be more efficient. But if we can do it with a mindset of making energy loops in there, so that in order to make ice, you have to take heat out of the process. Well, if we can take that heat and use it for other energy uses in the ice rink, or maybe even export it to the pool if we have enough, that would really be great. So those are the kind of things we're looking at, thanks, in the ice rink, and it's very exciting, but it's a lot of money, and that's a difficult nut. But I have to tell you, the ice rink makes a lot of money in the town, and it is a real draw in our community. I don't know if any of you are from Canada, but I have people come up to me all the time and say, I moved here for the ice rink. Of course, they're from Canada, but they really think that the ice rink is an important factor in our community. The other building we're really trying to focus on is the town center. The town center was built as a high school 100 years ago. It is a very beautiful old building that's been renovated in pieces. It's used for multiple purposes. We have a 24-hour police service in that building. And we have been trying to get our hands and handle around how to reduce energy use in that building. That's the second biggest user of energy in the town. And it's difficult. You know, you walk around the town center and some people are wearing fur coats and some people are wearing sundresses because the heat is out of whack. It's very unbalanced. It's not easy to fix it. You can't just call up your local HVAC folks and say, please come in here and fix it. It is a total comprehensive picture that has to be looked at, and Michelle is helping us with that. There's a lot of opportunities there, but again, it might take some investment as well. But I'm excited about these initiatives because I think it's going to set us up well for the future in saving us money going forward, reducing our energy use, and hopefully we'll be able to use some renewable energy sources to really power some of the needs in the community. We're also looking at the fleet of cars. We have 123 vehicles in the town of Mamaroneck. Sounds like a lot, but think about it. We've got a fire department, a police department, sanitation commission. We've got all kinds of people who are on 24/7 jobs in the town. And so we've got to look at those cars. We pay really, really low energy costs in the town of Mamaroneck, as does the village of Larchmont, because as a municipality in the state of New York, we get a break. It's a disincentive to trying to look at renewable energy. It makes renewable energy much more expensive. We get a big break on paying for energy as a municipality. We get a big break on buying cars as a municipality. So looking at a hybrid car is way more expensive than it is for a regular car. But we're going to look at analyzing our fleet and moving forward on that as well. The final environmental initiative I'll mention is the plastic bag ban proposal. The village of Mamaroneck has done it. Kudos to them. Westport's done it. Southampton's done it. Rye, the city of Rye has done it. Super kudos to them for doing it. I would like to see us do that in the town of Mamaroneck also. It's a controversial issue. Some people feel very, very attached to their flimsy plastic bags. I just would like to see us reduce plastic use. There's a lot of answers to every question that's raised about that issue, but that's something we're looking at as well. So I invite anyone who would like to volunteer and help us with these initiatives. We always need smart, active people who can help us. I want to thank my town board members, Ernie Odierna and Jane Eney and Abby Katz, for being here today and for working together on the town board. And those are really the highlights, and I think I actually came under the 10 minutes.
You're under your cap, kiddo. I think it's more than what. Well, let me just start off by saying that I think that Larchmont Village is very lucky to be in the town of Mamaroneck. We have wonderful administration. We do have a great deal of cooperation. I know that this league, and some of you may know that I was president of this league for a while at the time, especially at the time of the merger between the Larchmont and Mamaroneck leagues. The village and town are not merging, but I want to tell you that we do cooperate on many, many levels, both formally and informally, and we have a very good working relationship. So thank you, and it was very nice, very nice talk about overarching issues. And I wanted to start with some specifics. I've been mayor for 5 months. I was sworn in April, and it's been a very, very interesting time. We've had our knocks, as you know. We lost our police captain and his family under very, very tragic circumstances, which has led me on to sort of a sideline, and that is for a serious investigation of the sprinkler laws. You may know that the village of Larchmont did pass a sprinkler law in about 07, 08. And what it said is that for all new construction for commercial, which is the norm, for all new residential, meaning single-family homes, and for any home that is being demolished by 75%, and any new construction in those circumstances, we would mandate a sprinkler system. That was sent up to the state, as all laws have to be. All local laws do have to be vetted by the state and by the State Department of State, and we were turned down as being more restrictive than the state fire code. Now, this is something that is not that easy to do on a statewide level. It's not that easy to do on a county level, because many communities don't have municipal water systems. They're well water. And then you have to have your own pump. But then what happens if the pump goes out? And then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So sprinkler systems are not that easy to mandate on municipal level in many, many areas of the county. But if we're going to have the kind of construction that there is in many of these new homes that goes up very, very quickly, we really must have the linkage with some kind of sprinkler system or special alarm system. So that was sort of a sideline that was created by the tragedy that hit us all, town and village. I've got 3 pieces of paper on the wall next to my desk. Here's number 1, here's number 2, and here's number 3, and they're lists of stuff to do. And I thought I would start with describing what those are, but frankly, something that both of us got this past weekend blows all of this out of the water.
Yeah.
That is a notice from our state controller, Mr. DiNapoli, increasing the amount of our pension contributions. Now let me put this into context. We have 2 pension systems that the municipalities are involved with. What they call regular employees, and the other one is police and fire employees. And how this works is very simple. The state looks at our salary line, and it says, nice salary line, glad you've got all those firemen and policemen and regular employees on. Give us a percentage of their salary, please. Now, we don't know what the next calendar year is going to be. The town is on a calendar basis. We're on a fiscal year basis that starts in June. How do you manage a budget when you don't know what's coming down the road? Now, let me give you some of the perspective for this. Remember how I said a salary line? Our pension cost last year no, I should say this current fiscal year for just our police and fire, for the village of Larchmont, which has barely got 6,000 people, is $1,023,555. That's just police. Last year, taken out of the village of Larchmont and given to the state pension plan. The pension cost for our regular employees was $411,761. Those figures have doubled and tripled in the last 3 or 4 years. Now, when you're looking at that and you're saying, well, what are the percentages really that you're talking about? Our percentage of salary for police retirement has just gone up from 25% to 28.9%. We have a salary line, we're paying a man. One man comes in, we're going to give him $1,000 for the year. We have to come up with an additional 28.9% now that we give to the state for the salary, for the pension obligation for that one employee. Now, the newspaper article says that some of this will be exempt from the state cap. Now let's think about this for a moment. The state has imposed a 2% cap on the amount of money we can raise next year. 2% of what? 2% of our tax levy, which in our case is about $12 million. At the same time, it's giving us an increase, only part of which is exempt from that tax levy. How much of our tax levy is exempt? Or excuse me, how much of that 2% cap has just been taken up by this increase that we just got this weekend? Okay? I asked our treasurer to do a quick and dirty computation. Almost half. Almost 1%. Now, I ask you, how can we do anything? How can we do anything more? How can we face all the other obligations of government when we have a tax cap that has just been imposed by the legislature and the and the governor on this side, and have the governor's agency say, please pay just for your police more than what we did last year, which was $1 million, with a tax base of under 1,800 units. So that's enough of my rant. Now let me tell you what we're trying to do with the rest of that $12 million annual levy that we have. Well, let me get to my list. The first thing is probably the most visible, and that's one that we've been working on for years, and that is our Palmer Street streetscape. With a bit of good luck, we can begin that next week, and you're going to see a bit of an unusual setup. We're trying to get the retail stores done first. We're trying to get those stretches of Palmer Avenue that have the most retail stores completed by the end of October, early November, in order to preserve their holiday selling season, which is very, very, very important. So you might see a little choppiness. You know, we aren't going to start on one corner and go all the way. We may be jumping around a bit in order to preserve their storefronts. You're also going to hear a little bit about an assessment back to the property owners for the cost of the sidewalks and curbs. That's a small portion of the overall cost. But this is able to be financed over 15 years at 3 1/4, because we're going to be able to finance that portion as part of our overall bond that we really have authorized, and will go out to the market. And money is very cheap now. Money is very cheap, except that interest goes into our cap. But besides that, so if you want to do something, and you're saying, okay, it's going to cost the village $50,000 for the next 15 years for a project, $1.5 million, that is additional expenditure, and that is covered by that cap. What I am saying is that there's nothing in the law that prevents us from, the terminology is, busting the cap. But I think we all must really face the reality that that cap is going to be busted by many, many municipalities. I'm not guaranteeing it on our part. I can guarantee you that we're trying very hard not to do it. But sometimes there are unrealistic visions, unrealistic expectations of what a budget really is. I have my list of capital projects here, and I'm just going to blow through them very quickly. And that is our water department, our lovely tanks and pumps and water meters and mains and water breaks, significant one of which we've just had. And regarding the water department, shall we give them a heads up? We'll give them a heads up. There will be a robocall coming because of a water main break. Because of a water main break up on the reservoir property. There's going to be a workaround in order to supply water to the municipalities. Consequently, there's going to be an obligation to lower demand. The biggest demand this time of year, you won't believe it, is sprinklers and watering lawns. So there's going to be an order, an executive order going out for certain periods of time that will be established later today, saying no watering the lawns and turn off those sprinkler systems, thereby lessening the demand, better workaround, so we can get down to the work of repairing this water main break. These water systems are over 100 years old, and infrastructure has become my biggest concern. So we have the water department, and that's going to be very, very interesting. But let's face it, this time of year, we can all turn off our sprinkler systems, and I never water my lawn anyway, so don't bother. Let's talk about flood mitigation. We have had a significant flooding problem in the Pine Brook area of the village. And we have received a grant from the county of $2.3 million towards a $4.6 million project. But the county has said, let's look at all of the figures that you had supporting this project that were really worked on through 07 and 08 and 09. So right now we are reworking those figures, reworking the engineering concept, and also looking at the impact of some very significant work that New Rochelle has done upstream. Remember where IKEA was going to be? I know all of you were very, very active. That stretch of Fifth Avenue. If you look across the street, and if you look across the street, you see City Park, and all the work that has been done to improve those fields. Well, guess what? Significant retention tanks were placed under those fields. And you know what? That Pine Brook conduit goes under those fields. So we are talking about a situation where there has been an improvement upstream. And consequently, that has a significant impact. And we're measuring that impact right now as to the flooding mitigation necessary in Pine Brook. Still that's good news. That's really, really good news. And hopefully we'll get even a better project out of this. Remember Lorenzen Park? Lorenzen Park, a very squishy part of our children's experience. And Lorenzen Park is part fill, part swamp, part who knows what we could do with it if we hadn't been doing stuff with it for the last 150 years. Lorenzen Park is off of Boston Post Road and goes right up against the Premium Marsh. And the proposals were to add 2 new ball fields. Well, the DEC prevented us from going forward on that because it's so close to important marshlands. We are now engaged, with the help of a couple of people here in the room, in a procedure with the DEC for a variance from some of their regulations. For example, is a ball field really a structure within a buffer area for a wetlands? So we are going through that process right now. And we may be able to actually use this area for more recreational use by our baseball leagues, both formal and informal. I am really trying to get something as simple as LED lights on our traffic lights. The strangest things use the most power. Traffic lights are on all the time. And they're blinking, and they're on, and they're off, and they're on, and there are 3 of them, and some have arrows, and all sorts of things. Well, this is something that I've been engaged in, but haven't always been very successful in getting some grant money to actually change our light bulbs from what they are to something even better. But under the category of all things can go wrong, we've been told that some places like Minneapolis have discovered that the snow doesn't melt on LED lights. And that they actually had to get DPW people up talking this. Whereas the lights we have now melt the snow just like that. They're very powerful. I am going to be engaged in a very interesting exercise in the next couple of weeks about a little something that very few people know about. You know that our reservoir, which is also known as the Sheldrake Environmental Area, is mostly in New Rochelle. For a lot of historical reasons, it's there. It was a private company that dammed up the little Sheldrake stream, created a reservoir. The village of Larchmont bought it from the Larchmont Water Company back in the 1920s for a lot of money, over $300,000, and the majority shareholder of that company was Cornelius Vanderbilt. So here's the village back in the 20s buying the water department for its own use from a private company. So it's been known as a reservoir. The years go by, we decide very wisely, I think, in the early 60s, actually in the early 80s, after the reservoir had been closed in the 60s, to change this from a reservoir, which was really a business, into a nature conservancy. Meanwhile, the city of New Rochelle said, okay, we're going to stop taxing that piece of property. Because lots of cities have reservoir property outside their jurisdiction. That's just the way it is. But the New Rochelle School District has consistently taxed that property. And we're now up to almost $40,000 a year that the village of Larchmont pays the New Rochelle school system. So, we have asked very nicely for an exemption because of about 5 very good reasons, done with a great deal of help from Councilwoman Jane Eady, and we are going to be making a verbal presentation to the Board of Education at the end of this month. We have several arrows in our quiver, but this is one of those things that happen historically, and we hope to get some tax relief for the taxpayers of the village of Larchmont for the use by the community of a nature conservancy and flood mitigation project. What is that? Remember how I mentioned about flood mitigation, about the Pine Brook? This is the other system. This is the system that goes all the way down through the town and through the into the village of Mamaroneck and out to the Sound. So this reservoir is being lowered, or dewatered as they call it, before every storm in order to mitigate flooding in the town and in the village of Mamaroneck, and we'd like some relief. I'm sure you have a bunch of questions. I have more I could go, as some of my colleagues know, on, and I'll stop it with that. Thank you very much.
I want to thank our speakers. I wanted to mention this summer I had a wonderful experience. I sent out invitations to prior presidents of the League of Women Voters and had a wonderful dinner. Anne was one of the people present. Unfortunately, Christy couldn't make it. It was the summer. Not everybody was in town, but I think we had about 10 people there. And if you want to be in a room with some pretty extraordinary people, sit down with people who were in the League for a long time. It doesn't mean that a person has to be a president of the League in order to be an interesting person, but these are women who have shown really distinction in their fields. Some have gone on. Susie Oppenheimer went on to be a state senator. We've got a mayor here. But really more, it's the thoughtfulness of our sense of community. These women offered their support to me. I initiated the contact because I want to look ahead at the future of the League. And I'm going to ask Judy, what is our website? If people want to get to the website, how do they Google it? LWVLM.org. Okay, LWVLM as in League of Women Voters, LarchmontMamaroneck.org. And Judy Silberstein, who was the mastermind behind the Larchmont Gazette, put together our lovely website. And we're going to be sending out our membership information shortly. The League depends upon a vibrant membership in order to be able to serve the community. We just heard about some really staggering, both positive and negative. I would say the pensions seems to be, and this is not the first time we've heard this, an issue that really requires attention. It's not something that's going to go away. It's something that's only going to escalate over time. People live a long life, hopefully, and we have people that are employed, and we're going to have to figure out how we're going to handle this. These are issues that we can be dealing with. The infrastructure is something that I think a lot about. We've got bridges, we've got roads, we've got flooding, we've got sewers. These are things that are only going to become more important over time, and there are opportunities for us to become very well educated on these topics, to help work with our elected officials to try to resolve these issues. We've got kids in school, we've got any number of issues of importance, and the great thing about the League is if you come to us with something that is of interest to you, you've got the opportunity to explore it. There's a wonderful network going up to the state, and we really would welcome your participation. Before we open this up to questions, I just want to recognize that we have Assemblyman George Latimer here. We've got Steve Otis. I'd just like to give you an opportunity to say hello for a minute. If you would like to possibly address any of these issues, because I believe that you have had to deal with them, maybe you need to come up here, and then we'll open it up for some questions. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm going to mention two substantive issues quickly. One locally that you've raised, and one that's pending right now at the state. The local issue on pensions. The fundamental problem. I want to make sure I'm not yelling to the TV audience. the Howard Dean scream that he thought he was. I want to make sure that you understand that the tax cap bill that was passed was not unanimously passed. There are a number of us who raised objections. And one of the bills that we think will correct a problem in the tax cap bill is a bill that Tom Abenanti, my colleague, has. It has bipartisan support in the Assembly. It has not yet been filed in the Senate. And that is a bill that would cap the pension costs for the local governments that are living under a tax cap. So if you have a 2% cap on how much you can tax, then you also have a 2% cap on how much more your pensions can grow year over year. That would give you the breathing space. We think that would be helpful. Now, we're talking about communities in Mamaroneck Town and Larchmont Village. There are communities out there like Portchester and Mount Vernon and Peekskill that are in disastrous situations right now where some communities can manage the cap at the current time in terms of the pensions. But we think it is the state's responsibility. The state controller is the sole trustee of the pension fund. It is his responsibility to make sure that the pension fund is solvent. And how we invest money at the state level is the greatest single way to control non-tax dollars. So I think it's consistent, and those of us who support this approach hold the local governments harmless because you don't control how the pension fund is managed. You don't control how the investments are managed. Somebody's obviously trying to call me maybe they're seeing me at TV right now and they want to disagree with me. They'll have to wait his turn. The other issue I wanted to highlight that's a current issue right now. Legislature's out of session, but the governor and executive branch staff are dealing right now with whether or not we're going to move forward on hydrofracking. So if you have a strongly held position on the issue of hydrofracking, I know Beth does, and she's been very articulate about it, and a number of us have expressed some real concerns about it, you need to reach out to Governor Cuomo right now. Reach out to him, email, telephone if you see fit, and express your opinion, because he's on the verge of finalizing through the DEC a path toward starting hydrofracking. With the legislature out of session, there's a lot of bills up there, but they're not going to be dealt with. There's an election coming up that'll determine who sits in the legislature next year, and that's where most of the heavy lifting is going to be legislatively. But executive branch hydrofracking right now, and I did want to address the pension issue. Thank you.
I think they need me by the microphone, though. But I'll try and talk to both audiences. But I was a mayor for 12 years, so I'm very sympathetic to the problems that the municipalities have that Ann and Nancy are articulating. One little trivia question in terms of how much of your pension increase is not included in the tax cap, and this is how arcane this stuff can get. Ann indicated that for police and fire, the ratio was going to go from 25 to 28 and change. So the part that's not covered by the tax cap is anything above 27%. It's the index there is an exemption. And it's the index, which is different than the way New Jersey did it. New Jersey did the tax cap. Any net expense in retirement system payments over 2% when they did their tax cap was excluded from the tax cap. But New York did it in a more complicated way. I do support the legislation that George mentioned that Assemblyman Abenanti has, which is that to take over the 2%, make that a state responsibility. Understand that the way the Comptroller's Office calculates retirement system assessment increases, it relates to the stock market. There is an index of bills, index of funds that gets scored every March 31st that is the barometer by which actuarially the retirement systems go up or go down. And so on March 31st, they do this assessment and they figure out what everyone has to pay. And it does, of interest, it's not just a local government issue. State government pays the same assessment for all their employees. It is the actuarial index to keep the retirement system solvent. But it's not fair to have so much of this on the property tax. I have been able to work with Ann on the Lorenzen Park issue, as George has, and also we're trying to find some flood money to help supplement the Larchmont flood project. But my sympathies to local officials. especially because so many of these hidden infrastructure costs, which have to be done, you can't have your infrastructure of your community falling down. They're expensive, but nobody sees them. So what you heard here today is a little articulation, which local officials all over the state are going to have to do, to say, public, be aware, we have to pay to make sure the whole operation doesn't collapse, and it's going to cost money, and it's not sexy, and it's not something that anyone would ever think, oh, well, we can put this off. People would naturally think you can put it off. You can't really put it off, and so it's a real bind. My sympathies and anything I can do to help. Thank you.
With respect to the infrastructure, I'd like to offer the assistance of the league if there's anything that we can be doing with respect to this. We can turn up the sprinklers. There may be a public education campaign, but I think even having a survey possibly of what's going on, whether it's the sewers, the water, whatever it might be, understanding our utilities, whatever that might be around the community, so that we sensitize people about that. It also ties, and I'm on this renewable energy committee also with Michelle and others. Anything that we can be doing to making our lives more energy efficient may be helped by a better understanding of how the infrastructure works and how we individually tax it, with our use and overuse. So maybe we can be in touch about that. Why don't we open this up for questions in the remaining time? And if somebody has a question, I think I would suggest either if you say it, I can repeat it, or you can come up to the microphone. Michelle.
Can you give us an email to send the letter to about the fracking?
Well.
Where should we send it?
Oh, I would say the best thing to do is, with respect to hydraulic fracturing, write to Governor Cuomo and copy Commissioner Martens. It's important to get DEC in there, but you would want to write to Governor Cuomo and speak about your concerns. The notion that we're drilling in upstate New York and it therefore has no impact on us downstate is erroneous. There is a buffer around the watershed, but it's probably not sufficient. Talk about infrastructure fragility. Our infrastructure for our watershed is quite old, and there are fractures and fissures. Also, water migrates, and I don't think we've figured out exactly how to keep it from, coming down here, even with contamination. And likewise, with respect to the air, the methane gas is very potent, and it migrates also. And there are now more studies coming out to show that. And another piece with respect to liability is that the insurance that is held by the companies is not sufficient to pay for the risks. If you read their 10Ks, which I have, they are not fully insured. Many of them do not have the cash on hand allocated necessarily to pay for the catastrophic loss that will result. And if you take a look at what goes on in other states, even reading their own 10Ks, it's inherently risky activity and catastrophes happen on a regular basis. It's just part of doing business. We, the taxpayers, are going to have to expect that we are going to be subsidizing cleanup on this. And this is going to be not localized necessarily to people in places where the drilling is going on. It's going to be a statewide issue. So those are three examples of how this is going to impact all of us. And I would encourage you, just Google hydraulic fracturing and New York, and you'll have more than you want to read. But in any event, yes?
This is really going to a very mundane issue. I live on Palmer Avenue. The airport noise this summer has been horrendous.
Oh, okay.
Airport noise.
With the help of Congressman Lowy's office, I'm sorry to lose her. I've called the Port Authority that day, and I get either no response or, oh, well, they come up the Hudson and turn right. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. When Judy had a paper, there was an online forum. I don't know if there's anything to do, but it's driving me nuts.
So let me just mention, so for people to hear, the comment was with respect to the noise from the airplanes flying over Palmer Avenue on their route to, I don't know whether it's LaGuardia or Kennedy.
About 10, 12 years ago, this became quite an issue. and the idea was that there were some changes in the routes for the approach to LaGuardia, and there was quite a hubbub about it, and a group was started called Quiet Skies. Larchmont contributed a considerable amount of money for this. I remember more than $10,000 to get this thing going. We had meetings with the FAA, and the idea was that there were changes in the approaches because of changes in the kind of radar systems that were existing at the time. Then things literally quieted down. Now, what has happened in the meantime is that we as municipal officials get on kind of a regular basis emails from the FAA saying that a runway at LaGuardia is going to be closed this weekend. Consequently, the routes will be changed, and that's when we expect more airplanes. These have been coming on a regular basis, and I think it is time, because I've received complaints as well, to look at what has happened to that Quiet Skies initiative of about, as I said, 10 years ago. And I agree with you. It's time to dust that off, say, okay, really what is the status, and to do it as a group, a larger group. This Quiet Skies coalition involved Rye, the town and village of Mamaroneck, and Larchmont, and I believe New Rochelle, as sort of a coordinated whole to speak to the FAA and say what is going on, especially since there have been a change. And I totally agree with you.
There is an upcoming conference that's a Northeast Regional Conference regarding airport everything, including noise. And I sent it to my town board and asked if anyone would like to participate, but what we'd really like is to have some representation from the community participate in this conference. So can I give you that information if you would and consider participating? But I need you to email me and ask. Okay.
Yeah, and you keep that over to me. Okay. Because I know we have somebody who would be very interested as well.
Judy.
You talked a little bit about environmental initiatives that could lead to some savings, and with both of you being relatively new leaders, new energy at the top, have you started speaking to each other about ways that consolidations or cooperations could lead to some savings in the budget? We did have that big committee, and then we haven't heard since what the result of that report, if anything, was ever implemented that could have led to some savings. And I know there was some personalities and hard feelings, but now we've got new personalities, and we're hoping that the two of you perhaps could be working together on some savings, and we'd love to hear about that.
We could even talk about stray dogs.
We're always talking about it, Judy. That's really the answer. We're always thinking about it from a small perspective to a large perspective. The study that you referred to was really helpful, but we believe that some of the numbers were not correct in it, and that they overstated by huge magnitudes what the savings could actually be. But I leave it to the village to say what we want to do.
Just to mention about we found that if we can cooperate on something, a joint contract with the New Rochelle Humane Society about how it manages something as simple as stray dogs, which I should not say is simple. You'd be amazed how complicated this has ended up to be. But we are negotiating a contract that we are doing jointly with this organization, which will save us both money. And this is the technique that we have been using. Cooperation rather than consolidation. We are where we are for historical reasons. And we have to understand that we will continue working together even more than we do today on a very fundamental level. because we are together for sanitation as joint sanitation. I don't know whether you know that or not, but the village of Larchmont and the town of Mamaroneck have been working together for recycling and sanitation for ever.
80 years, I
80
think.
years, right? And we will be working even more together, and you're going to probably be seeing some changes in the way we operate, because there are some fundamental questions about whose trucks are they, who owns the trucks, who maintains the trucks. And by the way, those trucks, they're expensive. What are they, over $100,000 each for a garbage truck? Who thought, right? But they're used all the time. So it's on that kind of day-to-day level that we cooperate. We meet all the time.
And I think that because, you know, when you talk about consolidation, it raises a lot of red flags. Politically, it has been a non-starter, really.
Right.
So what Ann and I have done, and even with Norman, is to try and move forward in little bits and little bites to progress, to save money, to see if we can coordinate. And hopefully more and more it will lead to the eventuality that, hey, maybe it would make sense to consolidate something much larger or do something bigger. But I have to say that, you know, the sort of big picture in the sky of, you know, consolidating police departments, consolidating fire departments, consolidating big...
If there's a fire at the apartment buildings that are outside of the village of Larchmont, immediately our fire department is notified, and we go because we have another ladder truck. Why should it sit there and wait to be called in the next set of time? No, we are under mutual aid. We are notified immediately. The same time you're notified, we're notified. So we have all those kinds of arrangements that may not be immediately apparent, but in the day-to-day working, it's very seldom that we aren't working together.
In the moment that we have before we leave, I just want to remind people for the questionnaire for the town of Mamaroneck, can you just give us the reminder information?
Will you just pass that along there?
Yes.
Please just go to www.townofmamaroneck.org, and on the right-hand side it says Town Resident Survey.
Okay, www.townofmamaroneck.org. I'm going to pass this around. Yeah, Keith. Keith.
In the midst of my notes, I don't know if it was Nancy or Ann who made a comment regarding flood mitigation and the grant of $2 million. Who was that?
And
Okay. And then in the process, she said that budget-wise, it would be a $4 million initiative.
Right.
What is part of that? Is that survey? Is that what you call committee meeting, or is that a due process of actually doing something to resolve the problem?
This is a question about the flood mitigation, the $4 million price tag on it.
Right.
$2 million grant, though.
Yeah,
$2 million
50%.
grant, yes.
And by the way, that other 50%, we'd have to come up with.
Okay.
But, okay, the question is, at what's the stage of that? The stage is engineering studies.
See, that's that.
No,
that's-
well, I
that's
understand,
something that-
but no, engineering and construction. I mean, we are reviewing it on the village of Larchmont's own dime. We are reviewing the engineering ideas that have been brought out by our prior studies, and we paid thousands and thousands of dollars for these in the past. And it was, okay, let's look at this with a couple of things in mind. Number one, will doing only part of this engineering study work? Because we had several things that were to be done to mitigate the flooding. Would doing just some of these really work? Question number one to engineers. Number two, these prices that we were given were as of 06, 07. What are they now? What can we do with the money? And number three, changed circumstances. Since we've had something done that may or may not be significant. I'm not an engineer. I just know that if you do something up here and the water goes down here, we've got flooding down here, you've done something up there, there's some kind of effect. And we want to know about it before doing any more work.
So that's my question, as, I guess.
But
as
this
a
is
citizen,
before we spend any
but
of
I
that
understand
grant.
that. And somehow, because you know where I live in the village of Mamaroneck, and we actually live in a low point, and actually we become the river with the current and everything else that destroys our houses. So my question is...
Let me make an important point. The project I'm talking about is not yours.
No, but I understand
We're talking about a different flood, okay? We're flooding over here. You're flooding over there. What I have said does not affect the plans for your area. Okay.
You also asked about what New Rochelle did to probably alleviate some of the Larchmont problem. But, and it's just me talking to you, man, in that every time we hear something as a citizenry that money's allocated toward it, it actually goes toward a study of a study of another study without doing it. If somebody says $2 million, in our minds as citizens, okay, are we seeing the overgrowth of weeds and things with personnel? People who are unemployed say, let's clean that. Let's do that. Or is that money going toward a study?
No, this is going towards construction.
Okay.
Construction, right. With a few problems. With a few problems. This water goes into a critical marshland.
Environmental area.
Critical environmental area. In order to have this thing happen, we have to have the Department of Environmental Conservation. Those guys who told us that a ball field was a structure, okay, we have to get their approval. So we've got some problems.
Yes.
Question about the 2% cap. And, I mean, I hear what you're saying. What is the solution? In other words, is everybody going to have to override that 2% cap in order to be able to achieve the necessary solutions that you need in each community? Or, how are we going to deal with this?
The answer is yes. In order to continue to provide the level of services that we currently provide, we would have to override the cap. There is not a sustainable way to stay within a 2% tax levy cap and continue to do exactly what we do now.
Which is a very unpopular way of going about it, because people obviously don't want to pay more taxes than they think they should.
Right.
So
And
if everyone is involved in this, maybe we should need to change that 2% cap.
well, that's a
Bingo.
very good point, and we completely agree with that, but you have a governor who's pretty interested in having a national profile, and this sounds pretty good, even though it puts a very, very difficult burden on us. And let me just add that we didn't bust through the cap last year. We might not bust through it this year,
But next
year we would have to.
Very rough. Very
And,
rough.
I would like to prevent having, like a mini evolution here.
Oh, armed insurrectionist comes to mind some 2:30 in the morning.
I think that's what the
sometime.
governor wants.
Yeah, I think he may. And when I was just talking about that $4.6 billion project, we are only getting a grant for 50% of it. What's the cost to the village of $2.3 million over, let's say, 20 years? That annual cost goes into our budget once for the cap purposes. If you know anything about math, and I know some of you do, it goes in once, and then we blow the cap. Well, then we can do it, but it flattens out over a number of years, and the 2% is on top of the 2% of the prior year, on top of the 2%, on top of the 2%. So whether this is really forcing localities to have any fiscal constraint, we might just want to blow it one year, totally, and then create a much higher tax levy, and then the following year,
You can stay
you
within
can
it.
stay within the 2%. I mean, this is great creative thinking, huh? This is municipal
In
finance.
a very negative way. I mean, school districts are really going to have to pay for some.
But you know what's interesting about a school budget? And this we discovered by talking to the school superintendents. For purposes of the tax cap, interest payment, debt service, which probably includes principal, but I'm not,
It does.
principal and interest is excluded from the tax cap for school districts. So as one of our superintendents, meaning the Rhinex superintendent, told us, we're going to have great facilities because you can borrow and pay for it, and no teachers. So that's the difference between the school district cap, which is a much different animal and much more difficult to handle and much more risky. For us to bust the cap, this 2% cap, we need a majority of our board.
Yeah.
That's it.
We've got time for one more question, and then what I wanted to ask folks, though, is we're going to do our best to have monthly breakfasts. We may not hit every month, but we would welcome your suggestions for what you would like to hear about on Friday mornings. So if you want to email me, come up to me, speak to a member of the board, and let us know what would be of interest, because we're really here to be able to provide information that's of interest to you. We've got one more question.
A couple of years ago, there was a study in the community about sharing of services and the recommendation for joint detective force for the village of Larchmont and the town of Mamaroneck.
Right.
Can you describe for us what the obstacles are to achieving those savings?
What the study was that a joint detective service with the village of Larchmont and the town of Mamaroneck. And the detectives are a particular group of the police force that do detective work. Some are patrol detectives. We have all sorts of different titles for what people do. The idea was not only to have the joint, but who runs that division, under whose supervision. And it was stated that Chief of Police of the village of Larchmont be the chief of that particular division. I read that and I said, this is stillborn. There is no way that a town is going to give its pearl, the smartest guys in the division, over to the village of Larchmont for supervision. So,
But you weren't stuck with that recommendation. You could change it, no?
well, we can, the idea is still there as to the concept of having a joint detective force, but under whose supervision? And because we have two different jurisdictions, it didn't go anywhere.
Is that the only obstacle?
Well, it's a
Deciding who
big
would run
one.
it?
It's a big one that the town, I'll let the town speak for itself.
Yeah, the previous supervisor basically read that recommendation and said no. And that was it. She would not discuss it any further. She felt that it really put the recommendation it made it moot. Since that time, we have talked about the concept itself, and it is an incredible impediment as to who would run. I know it might not seem like it, but it truly is when you have two different municipalities.
Why not have a third party decide who's best qualified to lead that department?
Well, but you have two different union contracts, you have two different supervisory structures, you have two different governments, and you have two different areas. And it's one of those, gee, it looked good on paper.
The other thing that we saw, though, is that on paper they had estimated an enormous savings from it. And when we went back to analyze it, both the village and the town, both police departments, recognized that there was some serious flaws in the estimates of savings. And so it made it not nearly as worth it as it seemed to begin with.
Yeah, I was just going to add, when we reviewed everything, we got to realize that the stakeholders were not in the deliberation. So nobody that really knew what was going on was part of the debate as to how to make it work better. There were no police representatives, there were no fire representatives, so we came up with a bunch of, the committee came up with a bunch of theoretical solutions that turned out not to be really practical. The concept is always there. It's like motherhood. Who's going to say, I'm against motherhood? It makes sense to cooperate is what we're doing, as opposed to coordinate.
There's constant interchanges between between the two police forces.
Yes.
Yeah, and it went beyond the police department. It looked at all of the departments
Oh,
between
I'm just talking about this
But
particular.
they focused, the committee report focused on police as low-hanging fruit. They suggested that, hey, this is obvious. We should do this right away and combine it this way. Turns out it didn't make sense politically and practically. It was the wrong way.
I would just like to add, though, that on the survey that I hope you're all going to go home and take, there are specific questions as to who would you like to provide your fire service, ambulance service, police service, to get some feedback from the community as to whether there is what is perceived to be a real entrenchment of folks thinking that I only want my village of Larchmont Police Department, or I only want my village of Mamaroneck Police Department, to see whether folks are willing to say, hey, I would like to see the most efficient and most effective police service. It doesn't matter which municipality they come from. If we can get some feedback from folks that tells us that that's what they're truly interested in, I think that would help us move forward.
Thank you all very much. If anyone be able to help with voter registration, please see Sue Hertz. If you know anyone who isn't registered to vote, please ask them to register. It's election season. We've got a presidential election. We've got a U.S. congressional contest. We've got a state senatorial and assembly contest. We're going to have a candidates night in the beginning of October, where it's going to be meet and greet the candidates. I believe it's going to be at Mamaroneck Public Library. There won't be any speeches. It'll be an opportunity to meet and mingle. And then we'll be having our debates the Thursday before Election Day. We haven't, I don't believe, secured the location, but we look forward to a vigorous debate season. Thank you all for coming, and have a good weekend.